Welcome to today's story. You're mentally unstable. My fiancée screamed. Then I saw my brother smirk. And I knew the truth. This isn't just a tale of betrayal. It's a raw journey through humiliation, heartbreak, and the quiet power of truth. Imagine giving your love, your loyalty, your trust, only to be publicly broken by the very people who claim to care. But when a man sees the truth behind a smirk, everything changes. This is not just revenge. This is redemption told in silence. Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. We will love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. I always believed betrayal came with noise, with shouting, slamming doors, or maybe angry texts hurled in the middle of the night. But that night, betrayal came dressed in a red evening gown, with a wine glass in hand and a smile so convincing it could fool a jury. It was our engagement dinner, just close friends and family gathered around a long table lit with soft candles and the kind of laughter that makes you feel like you're safe. My fiancée, Rachel, had insisted on the event. She said we needed one last celebration before we started serious wedding planning. I'd spent the whole afternoon organizing the setup, triple-checking the wine selections, and even polishing my speech, which I never got the chance to deliver. Because as I lifted my glass for a toast, she interrupted with a tone that instantly sliced the room in half. "You're mentally unstable," she said loudly, her eyes wide as if revealing some truth she could no longer keep inside. The clinking of glasses froze mid-air. Her voice echoed, bold and cold, like a judge delivering a sentence. I blinked, unsure if I had misheard her. But everyone else had heard it too. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My father leaned forward, confused. My best friend Dan opened his mouth, then shut it again. Then Rachel stood, setting her glass down with careful precision, and said, "I've tried. God knows I've tried. But I can't marry a man who refuses to get help, who denies his issues. I can't do it." She turned sharply and walked toward the hallway. The door clicked shut seconds later. I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt like someone had poured cold water over my spine. But in that moment, what cut deeper than her words was the flicker of movement across from me. My brother, Sean, seated just to the left of the empty chair she left behind, smirked. It was quick, barely a twitch of the mouth, but unmistakable. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and I saw something smug behind them. Like satisfaction. Like this had gone exactly the way he wanted. That was when the room collapsed around me. Not physically, but emotionally. Voices returned, people whispering, some checking on me, others asking if I needed help. I heard none of them clearly. My mind was replaying that smirk, again and again, while everything else faded. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was clarity. Rachel's outburst hadn't been spontaneous. No one stages that kind of performance without rehearsing. And Sean, he'd seen it coming. Hell, maybe he had written the script. I rose slowly and mumbled something about needing air. I don't remember who tried to follow me or if anyone even did. I stepped outside, into the darkness of our backyard, and let the cold wrap around me like a blanket of numbness. My heart was racing, but my head had already begun working, not with grief, but calculation. Rachel's words weren't an insult. They were a trigger, a setup, and Sean's smirk was the crack in the illusion. Something was going on between them, something ugly. It wasn't like I hadn't noticed odd things lately. Rachel had become secretive with her phone, overly protective of her schedule, claiming last-minute emergencies at work. And Sean, he had started showing up to my place without warning, just to check in, he said, but I always caught him lingering too long near her. I chalked it up to jealousy or paranoia. Now, I wasn't so sure. I remembered a conversation months ago where Rachel briefly mentioned she had once gone on a few dates with Sean. Just teenage stuff, she claimed. But what if that stuff had never ended? As I stood there in the dark, one thought cemented itself in my chest like stone. I wasn't going to be the man who stood around wondering, what if? I was going to be the man who found out. If Rachel and Sean had planned to humiliate me, to paint me as unstable and walk away with clean hands, they would regret it. I would make sure of that. And I would do it quietly, precisely, like a surgeon removing poison. The next morning, I didn't call Rachel. I didn't respond to the few messages I received from friends asking if I was okay. I didn't even tell my parents what I suspected. Instead, I booted up my old laptop and began tracing back every digital footprint I could think of. Every shared folder, every cloud account we had ever connected. Rachel was careful, but not careful enough. In our early days, we'd shared notes and calendars on a platform I doubted she even remembered existed. But I did. As the login screen loaded, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Not because I expected to find something right away, but because I finally had direction. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about the betrayal that wore my last name before it even got the chance. And that smirk, the one Sean flashed at the dinner table, was now burned into my memory like a challenge. They wanted to play games with me? Good. I've never liked losing. The days that followed were wrapped in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating kind that seeps into your skin and makes everything around you feel fake. No calls from Rachel. No texts explaining her sudden outburst. No apologies. Just silence. And from Sean? Not a word. He vanished into thin air, which was unlike him. Normally, he'd be the first to show up, pretending to care, to check in. But this time, nothing. That alone told me more than any confession could have. Something was deeply wrong, and he didn't want to risk saying anything that would expose it too early. I stayed indoors, barely sleeping, barely eating, just watching and waiting. I told work I needed a few days. I turned off notifications, closed the blinds, and turned my apartment into a war room. My old laptop sat open on the dining table, documents, cloud accounts, and old shared folders stacked like loaded weapons on my screen. I was methodical. I combed through everything: event photos, shared notes, and synced contacts. For hours, nothing. Then, on the third night, I found it. A message buried in the notes section of a shared folder titled Engagement Ideas. The message was short. A reminder. Dinner's the night we flip him. Smile after she says it. It was dated a week before the dinner. It had been deleted, but not completely. My heart stopped. Flip him. Was I a coin they tossed around for sport? My fists clenched as the image of Sean's smirk replayed in my mind. He had smiled on cue, which meant they had rehearsed this, planned it, probably even joked about it. The thought made my stomach twist. I wasn't just betrayed. I was made a fool, played like a puppet for their little performance. The rage didn't come all at once. It came slowly, like a slow-burning fire, steady, deliberate, and irreversible. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and tried to breathe. There was no longer any doubt. Rachel and Sean were in this together. But what was their motive? Why destroy me so publicly? Why stage an emotional ambush and call it concern? It wasn't just heartbreak, it was strategy. That's when something else dawned on me. Rachel had been pressing me to cancel the prenup I drafted. She called it a lack of trust, said it was a red flag. I had refused, and she wasn't happy. But now, paired with the public accusation of me being mentally unstable, it started to make sense. If I looked emotionally unfit, she could walk away and challenge the prenup. Maybe even take a piece of what I'd spent years building. And Sean? He always hated that I was the golden son. The responsible one. The one who didn't blow his inheritance on get-rich-quick schemes and bad relationships. Maybe this was his way of balancing the scales, or just destroying what he couldn't have. Suddenly, I remembered a night 2 months earlier. Sean had shown up uninvited, drunk and bitter. He joked that Rachel was too good for me. At the time, I laughed it off. Now it echoed differently. I spent the next few hours backing up every file, screenshotting every hint of communication I could find. I wasn't going to confront them yet. I needed to stay calm, silent, strategic. If they wanted to humiliate me in public, I would give them the same courtesy, only with receipts and evidence, and a room full of people who mattered to them. I was done playing the fool. That night, I sat on my balcony staring at the city lights below, thinking about all the moments I had loved Rachel honestly. I thought about how I defended her when friends said she seemed too interested in my finances. I thought about how I brushed off my mother's discomfort, how I told her Rachel was just misunderstood. I remembered the time I gave Sean money to get back on his feet after he lost his job. Money I now realized might have been used to fund dates with my fiancée behind my back. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It was a betrayal of loyalty, of trust, of brotherhood. And that hurt in a way I couldn't even begin to articulate. The next morning, I shaved, put on a clean shirt, and looked in the mirror like a man preparing for war. I didn't look broken anymore. I looked determined. I sent Rachel a message. You were right. I wasn't okay. But I'm getting help now. Can we talk soon? I'd like to make things right. It was bait. She replied within minutes. I'm so glad to hear that. Maybe you're finally seeing what I've been saying all along. The gall. The arrogance. She really believed she had me fooled. Perfect. I played the part of the reformed man. Said I'd started therapy. Said I wanted to fix things slowly. I invited her to brunch with our families in 2 weeks. She agreed. So did Sean, when I texted him an olive branch. They thought they had won. That I was back under control. That the weak, emotional man they painted would just roll over and beg for their approval. But I wasn't coming to that brunch with apologies. I was coming with the truth. And I was going to let them taste the same humiliation they tried to feed me. Only colder, sharper, and in front of the people whose opinions they valued most. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was justice. For the next several days, I lived 2 lives. One that Rachel and Sean could see, and one that only I knew existed. On the surface, I played the part of the broken man seeking redemption. I sent thoughtful texts, apologized for my episodes, even thanked Rachel for saving me. Every word I typed made my skin crawl, but I kept my hands steady because this wasn't about feelings anymore. This was chess. And while they moved their pawns with arrogance, I was already working the board with eyes on the king and queen. Behind the curtain, I was building a file, something solid, undeniable, and bulletproof. I hired a private investigator, an old friend from college named Marvin who owed me a favor. He wasn't cheap, but he was discreet and fast. I gave him 1 week to uncover any evidence of an ongoing affair between Rachel and Sean. In the meantime, I dove deeper into the digital trail. If their betrayal was coordinated, then surely it left breadcrumbs. People like them always think they're smarter than they are. Sure enough, Marvin called on the 4th day with results that made my heart sink and burn at the same time. She's been at his place 3 times in the last 2 weeks, he said. Twice overnight. I didn't speak. My breath just froze in my throat. I've got pictures, timestamps, even footage of them kissing in the parking garage. You want it sent now? Yes, I said, my voice low. Send it all. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the ugliness I had chosen to see head-on. There they were, my brother and the woman I was supposed to marry, locked in each other's arms as if I never existed. Each frame punched harder than the last. But strangely, there were no more tears left. I'd cried them out the night of the dinner. Now, all that remained was steel. And focus. I named the file folder Operation Closure and stored every image, every screenshot, and every screen-recorded scroll through their deleted messages into it. One particularly damning screenshot showed a message from Rachel to Sean that read, "He'll probably lose it at dinner. That's when you'll step in. Make sure you look shocked but calm. It'll seal the narrative." Narrative. That word twisted something inside me. They weren't just betraying me. They were crafting a story. A deliberate tale in which I was the unstable villain and Sean, the concerned brother, became the sympathetic shoulder she fell onto. She wanted out of the relationship without looking like the monster, and he just wanted to destroy me. Maybe it was envy. Maybe it was about Rachel. Or maybe he just couldn't stomach the fact that I was everything he failed to be. At that point, I realized something more painful than the affair. They wanted to erase me, not just emotionally, but reputationally. They wanted the world to see me as dangerous, unfit, broken. That way, when they finally made their relationship public, they could say it all started after my mental collapse. They could be the heroes of their own story, tragic lovers brought together by trauma. But that narrative would never see the light of day, because I was rewriting the script. In the days that followed, I worked like a man possessed. I compiled everything into a digital presentation. Short clips, images, messages, and Marvin's timestamps, each slide meticulously organized. I added context without commentary. I didn't want to tell the audience what to feel. I wanted them to see it all themselves and reach the only possible conclusion. I even included a clip from our home security camera the night before the dinner, Rachel sneaking into the hallway with her phone, whispering something about timing the meltdown. I kept communication with Rachel casual but just warm enough to keep her guard down. I said I was excited for the brunch. Said I was grateful for the chance to apologize to everyone. Said I would be making a little speech to clear the air and thank them all for their support. Rachel replied with a smiley face and a can't wait. Sean, predictably, remained silent, but he confirmed his attendance through our mother. He's just glad you're seeking help, she said. You know he's always wanted the best for you. I didn't respond. I just smiled. The irony was almost poetic. He thought he had finally stepped into the spotlight. But when the curtain rose, he wouldn't be applauded. He'd be exposed. The night before the brunch, I stood in my living room and rehearsed my words in front of the mirror. Not a dramatic monologue, just a calm delivery. I didn't want to scream or cry or beg. I wanted my voice to sound like it had on our first date. Measured, clear, and composed. I was no longer the man they branded as unstable. I was the man who had endured a blow and stood up straighter because of it. As I packed my laptop, I slipped a small black USB into my inner coat pocket. It held everything, just in case. Then I stepped outside, breathed in the night air, and whispered to myself, they wanted a story. I'll give them one they'll never forget. The morning of the brunch was unusually quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from peace, but the kind that signals something is coming. My apartment felt colder than usual, despite the summer sunlight spilling in through the blinds. I had barely slept the night before, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Today wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my name, my dignity, and every piece of myself they tried to tear apart with lies. I dressed with deliberate care. Black tailored suit, polished shoes, no tie. I wanted to look exactly how I felt. Sharp, focused, unshakable. I arrived at the brunch venue 15 minutes early. It was one of those rooftop lounges with wide glass windows and an expensive view of the city skyline. Rachel picked it weeks ago when things were still good. I had paid the deposit. Funny how poetic things come full circle. The staff greeted me warmly. I had called ahead to ensure the projector and screen were fully functional. Just showing a family slideshow, I told them. That wasn't a lie, not really. As the tables filled, so did the tension. Familiar faces trickled in. My parents, her parents, mutual friends, cousins. Everyone wore that hesitant smile you give when you don't know what version of someone is showing up. Rachel walked in 10 minutes late, as always, arm in arm with Sean. That alone made some heads turn. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. She wore a light blue dress, and that same careful smile she wore at the engagement dinner, the smile of a woman who believed she had won. Sean wore a dark suit and arrogance like cologne. Hey, you, Rachel said softly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I turned slightly, letting her lips brush air. Thank you for doing this, she added, placing a hand on my arm. I figured it's time we brought everything to light, I replied. Sean nodded once. Good to see you looking better, man. I smiled back. I feel clearer than ever. We took our seats. Polite conversation buzzed across the tables. Work, weddings, the weather. I barely heard any of it. My mind was counting down. After the meals were served and the dishes cleared, I stood. The room fell quiet faster than I expected. Maybe they sensed something. Maybe they remembered how the last dinner ended. I cleared my throat and took the microphone the manager handed me. First, thank you all for being here. I know the past few weeks have been strange, painful, but today isn't about apologies. It's about truth. A ripple moved across the room. Rachel tilted her head slightly. Sean raised a brow. I continued. You all saw what happened at the engagement dinner. You heard Rachel say I was mentally unstable, and maybe some of you believed it. That's okay. I probably would have too had I not known what I know now. I turned toward the projector and nodded at the staff member. The screen flickered on. The first image appeared, Rachel and Sean in the parking garage, embracing. Gasps echoed. Murmurs rose. Rachel sat bolt upright. Sean stiffened. What is this? Rachel asked, a tremble in her voice. I didn't answer. The slides moved forward, screenshots of messages, videos from the hallway camera, even the deleted flip him note. The room went dead silent. Every eye darted between the screen and the two people who once called me family. Everything you're seeing, I said quietly, was orchestrated by the two people I trusted most. Rachel and Sean planned to humiliate me, stage a breakdown, and paint me as unstable, so she could walk away from our prenup, and he could finally feel like he'd beaten me. No, this isn't true. Rachel suddenly stood. He's twisting things. I raised a hand. I'm not here to argue. I'm just here to present facts. More slides. More texts. Even a recorded voicemail Rachel left for Sean. Her voice rang out through the speakers. Once he's painted crazy, no one will question why we're together. Trust me. Rachel's mother covered her mouth in shock. My father stared straight at Sean, jaw clenched. My mother's hands were trembling on her lap. Rachel, red-faced and shaking, looked at me with wild eyes. You planned this, she screamed. Yes, I replied calmly. After you tried to erase me in front of the people I love. I thought it was only fair you received the same stage you gave me. Sean stood, trying to speak, but no words came out. He looked to our father, who only shook his head in disgust. You did this for what? My dad asked. Jealousy. Sean didn't answer. He just walked out. Rachel followed seconds later, heels clicking like gunshots across the floor. I turned back to the stunned room. I don't expect forgiveness for pretending things were fine the last few weeks. But I needed you all to see the truth, not their version of it, but the real one. There was silence. Then a slow, hesitant applause, led by my mother. Others joined in. Not for performance, but, I think, for survival. They didn't know what else to do. I nodded once, handed the mic back, and left the venue without looking back. I didn't need to. The storm had passed. I didn't drive straight home after the brunch. I parked by the riverside instead, letting the calm of the water and the quiet hum of the wind dull the ringing still in my ears. I had done what needed to be done. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was about making sure the truth had a voice, especially when two people tried so hard to strangle it into silence. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without tension riding my ribs. The mask was off, and whatever happened next, I would face it as myself, unashamed, unbroken, and unafraid. My phone buzzed endlessly in the hours after I walked out. Missed calls. Messages. Some from friends who'd apologized for doubting me. Others from relatives who'd expressed their disgust at what Rachel and Sean had done. I ignored them all. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't want pity. What I wanted was peace, and to rebuild what they tried to ruin with one orchestrated evening of lies and performance. Then came the messages from Rachel. First, confusion. Why would you do that to me? I didn't deserve to be humiliated like that. Then denial. We were just talking. Nothing ever happened between us. Then blame. You made me feel unwanted. That's why Sean happened. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to. The screen had already said everything. The guests had already seen the truth. Her words were just dying embers after a fire that already consumed the house. What she feared most had already happened. People knew who she really was. And Sean, he stayed silent. I guess when the applause he thought he'd earned turned to silence, he didn't have much to say anymore. 3 days after the brunch, my lawyer filed a formal lawsuit against Rachel for defamation and emotional distress. The evidence Marvin and I gathered made the case airtight. She had called me unstable, sent that lie to half our family and friends, all while plotting to ruin my reputation and challenge the prenup in court. The claim was strong, and the damages real. I didn't need the money. I just wanted the record to reflect the truth. I also sent a quiet letter to my parents explaining everything they hadn't seen in the presentation. The small betrayals, the months of manipulation, the subtle mental games Rachel and Sean played behind the scenes. I wasn't trying to win their approval. I just didn't want silence to give way to confusion. They had the right to know everything before they made peace with their other son. My father didn't respond. My mother did. A single sentence. You didn't just survive it. You stood taller after. It hit me harder than I expected. Not all betrayals come with a knife. Some come with applause. And that, I had learned, was the cruelest part of it all. But I had turned their applause into an echo of shame. One they'd hear in every whisper and side glance from now on. Later that week, I walked into the same lounge where the brunch had been held. The staff greeted me like an old friend. I tipped them again. I didn't owe them anything, but I had this need to leave the space cleansed, touched by kindness instead of venom. The manager asked if everything had turned out all right. I smiled. It turned out exactly how it needed to, I said. As I sipped black coffee by the window, I thought about how fast things had fallen apart, and how quickly truth built them back up. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was something else entirely, free. And in that freedom, I rediscovered something Sean and Rachel never could understand. Peace doesn't come from control, or lies, or power over someone else. It comes from truth, and standing in it, no matter how loud the storm gets around you. That same night, I received a handwritten letter. No name on the envelope, but the handwriting was Rachel's. I opened it out of curiosity, not emotion. It was 5 pages long. Apologies, rationalizations, excuses dressed up as regrets. She begged for another conversation. Not to fix things, she wrote, but to explain why I broke them. I folded the pages back and tossed them into the fire pit on my balcony. I didn't need explanations. Some wounds are best left uncovered. So they harden, scar, and never bleed again. As the flames died down, I got one last text. From Sean. Guess you won. You always do. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because silence was the loudest truth I could give him. I closed the balcony door, locked it, and sat in the dark, no longer in hiding, but in quiet. A kind of quiet I earned. A kind I understood now more than ever. Weeks passed. The noise faded, as all noise does. People moved on, the way people do. The text slowed, the questions stopped, and the story that once blazed through every corner of our family began to settle like ash. I didn't push it away. I let it linger. Let it remind me what silence can teach you. Silence, I learned, isn't emptiness, it's revelation. It's the space where you finally hear your own voice after everyone else tried to speak for you. And when I heard mine again, it didn't sound like the broken man they tried to make me believe I was. It sounded like truth. Rachel disappeared from public spaces for a while. Friends who once admired her avoided her name in conversation, not because I asked, but because they knew. The lawsuit made headlines in our local community newsletter. Her name became the echo of betrayal, and even her employers took notice. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I wasn't seeking her punishment. I was simply reclaiming the ground she tried to bury me beneath. The court ordered her to pay damages, and though the settlement wasn't extravagant, it was enough to make a point. A legal record now reflected what she had done, so no one could twist it again. Sean, on the other hand, tried to regain footing. He posted a vague status online about family being complicated and truth being subjective. But people weren't buying it. Silence had stripped their masks, and nothing he could say would put it back on. My father stopped speaking to him. My mother kept communication polite but brief. And me? I made it clear I wasn't holding a grudge. I was holding a boundary. He could live his life. He just couldn't bring it anywhere near mine. I focused on healing, not the Instagram kind, not the performative kind, but the quiet kind. Long walks without checking my phone. Cleaning out my apartment of anything that reminded me of her. Canceling venues, returning gifts, unfollowing mutual friends without fanfare. It felt less like erasing and more like making room. Making room for a version of myself that didn't flinch at manipulation. A version that didn't mistake loyalty for blindness. One afternoon, I passed by the bookstore where Rachel and I had our first date. I almost crossed the street to avoid it, but something in me said no. I walked in, browsed a few sections, and even bought a new journal. I wasn't trying to rewrite the past. I was just ready to write the next part myself. No more ghost-written chapters by liars and love masks. Eventually, people started talking to me differently. Not like someone who survived something, but like someone who owned what he survived. I went back to work. I joined a support group for men who'd been through betrayal and manipulation. Not because I needed comfort, but because I needed to make sure others knew they weren't alone in being emotionally ambushed and told to be quiet. If my story could teach someone else how to listen to their gut, how to watch for the smirk behind the mask, then none of it was in vain. Then one evening, months later, I received a letter in the mail, different handwriting this time. Not Rachel's. It was from her mother, 3 pages long, apologizing, not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging the role her silence played. She admitted she saw signs, heard whispers, chose to believe her daughter's version of the story because it was easier than confronting what she feared might be true. I hope you find someone, she wrote, who will never make you question your sanity to protect their lies. I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my journal, not because I needed it, but because it marked the last ripple of a storm that had finally stilled. Closure doesn't always come in grand speeches or dramatic finishes. Sometimes it comes in 3 handwritten pages of regret from someone who finally saw you clearly. As the sun set that evening, I made myself a drink, sat out on the balcony, and watched the sky shift into its quiet hues of orange and gold. I didn't need an audience. I didn't need vindication. I just needed this peace. The kind you fight for in silence. The kind you win not with anger, but with truth. And as for Rachel and Sean, wherever they were, I hope they found what they were looking for. I truly did. Because whatever they gained in deceit, they lost something much harder to regain. Trust, reputation, and the kind of loyalty they will never see again. As for me, I wasn't looking back anymore. The fire they started had forged me into something stronger. And the silence they left me in, that silence became my sanctuary. If this story moved you or opened your eyes, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true-to-life tales that dig deeper than surface drama. Share this video if you believe in standing up against betrayal and reclaiming your truth. Your support helps bring more of these stories to light. Thank you for being here.